A dying cassette player on a trestle bridge, a philosopher's last words, and what your kids already know that language can't fully say. This week's AFM is about how we reach for meaning and what happens when the signal slows down. This is Aloha Friday Motivation, number 309, Last Night. Happy Aloha Friday, everyone. My youngest son has a relationship with time that I find both maddening and quietly profound. Ask him about anything that happened in the past, 3 months ago, last Tuesday, yesterday morning, and the answer is the same. Last night. Always last night. The word for then and the word for recent haven't separated yet in his mind. They're the same drawer. I'll admit it used to frustrate me, but now I think he might be onto something. And my older son, he's building his vocabulary the way you'd build a Lego set. One brick at a time, testing each piece's placement before he moves to the next step. We find rhymes together. We argue about slant rhymes. We make puns so bad they loop back around to good. The other day, we were talking about something being familiar, and he paused and said, "It sounds a lot like from earlier." And I didn't have a quick answer for that because he wasn't wrong. But before kids were even a glint in my eye, I was wrestling with all the entanglements of language thanks to Professor Adrian McFarlane. Sophomore year at Hartwick, a class called Language, Meaning, and Truth. It was super heavy. That's where I first met Ludwig Wittgenstein, a philosopher who spent his entire life on exactly that problem. Ludwig died April 29th, 1951. But before all that, he gave away his family fortune, volunteered for the Austrian army in World War I, and eventually became the most influential philosopher of the 20th century twice, with two completely different philosophies. The first said, language is a precise picture of reality, and anything it can't picture shouldn't be spoken at all. He ended his seminal work, the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, with a single sentence that hits like a door closing. Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. Then, he changed his mind entirely. The second Wittgenstein said, meaning isn't fixed. Meaning is use. It lives in the exchange, in the context, in who's speaking and who's listening and what world they happen to be standing in. The limits of language aren't walls. They're coastlines, always shifting, always being redrawn by whoever's standing at their edges. His last words, spoken to his doctor's wife before losing consciousness, tell them, I've had a wonderful life. The man who spent 60 years mapping what language can and cannot carry chose, at the end, 7 words, and they were enough. Someone else who understands that, maybe better than anyone alive, turns 57 today. Wes Anderson. I've loved his work since I found the Criterion Collection DVD of Rushmore and disappeared into it completely. Max Fisher, Dirk, Mr. Bloom, Mrs. Cross. Anderson builds worlds the way Wittgenstein built propositions. Precise, controlled, every frame a deliberate choice. But what those worlds mean, why they hit you the way they do, that escapes the frame entirely. It shows itself. The Bloom chapel speech, the double cigarette in the elevator at the hospital, the slow pan across Max's extracurricular bulletin board, Bloom's final words in the chapel speech, take dead aim on the rich boys, get them in the crosshairs, and take them down. Just remember, they can buy anything, but they can't buy backbone. That lands differently depending on who you were when you first heard it. That's not Anderson failing to fix the meaning. That's the coastline doing what coastlines do. I know this because of a cassette player and a trestle bridge. I'll take you back to Hartwick College, Oneonta, New York, some Saturday in early 2000, though my youngest would simply say it was last night. My best friend, Don Robbo, Rob McNaughter, or Robster Mobster as he was known back then, and I had wandered out to the backfield of the Pine Lake Environmental Campus. Acres of open space where the line between reality and everything else got pleasantly blurry. I had this cassette player that I got from a thrift store, one of those rectangular relics with the flip top lid and the row of keys at the bottom, play, stop, record, and a handle at the top like a lunchbox. I'd be making mixtapes in my dorm room. Half Step, Mississippi Uptown Toodaloo by the Dead, bleeding into a Max Fisher monologue, bleeding into Jeff Buckley, bleeding into Will Hunting, bleeding into Fish, bleeding into Forrest Whitaker and Ghost Dog. We were in the backfield dancing on the decaying wood planks of the trestle bridge when the batteries of that cassette player started to die. Now they don't stop, they die. D batteries, they don't quit, they just slowly decay. And as they did, the tape slowed. A scene from Good Will Hunting, Will catching a Harvard student plagiarizing, completing the stolen sentence before the thief can finish it. Wood drastically underestimates the impact of social distinctions predicated upon wealth, especially inherited wealth, stretched into something low and oceanic. The words pulling apart from each other like taffy, meaning warping at the edges. Time was distorting or turning elastic. Or language was. Hard to say when one ended and the other began. To this day, Rob and I quote it that way, drawn out, slowed down. The battery is dying forever. And my kids are growing up inside all of it, building their vocabularies in real time, making their own mixtapes of meaning. My youngest collapses all of the past into last night. My older one hears familiar and thinks from earlier, and they're not wrong. They're just on their own trestle bridge, batteries at full charge, everything still at full speed. So here's the weekend nudge. What are you trying to say that language keeps failing to carry? Maybe it doesn't need words. Maybe it needs a mixtape, or standing on a bridge while the sound slows down. Thanks for reading and thanks for listening. I'll see you next Friday. Mahalo nui.